PlayStation may be quietly testing the waters on the future of one of its biggest franchises, and it's doing it in a way that's subtle enough to fly under the radar if you're not paying attention. Recently, reports began circulating that Sony has been sending out surveys to select players asking about their interest in something called Horizon Hunters Gathering. And while that name alone hasn't been officially announced or explained, it immediately sparks a lot of questions about where the Horizon series could be heading next. This isn't a trailer drop, it isn't a blog post, and it isn't a stage presentation moment. This is Sony going directly to players behind the scenes to feel out an idea before committing to it, and that alone makes this worth talking about. What's important to understand right away is that Horizon Hunters Gathering is not a confirmed game. There's no release window, no platforms listed, and no official acknowledgement from Guerrilla Games or PlayStation Studios. What we do know is that surveys like this are usually sent when a concept is still being evaluated, when a publisher wants to understand player appetite before moving forward. Sony isn't asking whether people like Horizon as a franchise. They already know that answer. They're specifically asking about interest in a project with a very deliberate title, and that wording strongly suggests a shift in format rather than another traditional single player sequel. The name itself does a lot of heavy lifting. Hunters implies a focus on combat encounters, tracking, preparation, and teamwork. Gathering implies multiple players coming together, whether that's in a shared space, a hub, or coordinated missions. This does not sound like Horizon Zero Dawn or Horizon Forbidden West, which are deeply narrative driven solitary experiences centered on Aloy's journey through a carefully structured open world. Instead, this sounds like a spin off concept, potentially designed around co op play, repeatable activities, or a more systemic approach to gameplay rather than a tightly scripted story. One of the most obvious comparisons people are already making is to Monster Hunter, and honestly, it's not a stretch. Horizon's machines are already designed like boss encounters with specific weak points, attack patterns, elemental resistance, and mechanical behaviors that reward preparation and strategy. Translating that into a cooperative hunting format where players work together to take down large machines actually makes a lot of sense on paper. The Horizon universe is already built for that kind of gameplay loop, and it's something fans have casually discussed for years whenever co op comes up as a hypothetical feature. Another likely possibility is a hub based multiplayer experience where players gather in a central location from parties, accept contracts or missions, and venture out into contained zones to complete objectives. This would allow Sony to build something scalable, something that could evolve over time without needing to match the massive scope and budget of a full mainline Horizon entry. It would also align with Sony's broader interest in expanding into games that encourage long term engagement without necessarily replacing their single player tentpoles. And that brings us to the part of this conversation that makes people uneasy. Sony has been very open over the past few years about its desire to invest in more live service style projects. That doesn't automatically mean aggressive monetization or battle passes, but it does mean games designed with longevity, retention, and ongoing content in mind. Horizon is one of Sony's safest brands to experiment with because it has strong recognition, a rich world, and an audience that already understands its systems. Sending out a survey instead of making an announcement suggests Sony knows that it's a delicate move and wants to measure reaction before taking the next step. The survey itself is arguably the most important part of this entire story. When publishers send out surveys like this, they're not just asking whether people would buy the game. They're trying to understand expectations, tolerance, and enthusiasm. They want to know whether fans would accept a Horizon experience that doesn't revolve around Aloy, whether multiplayer is seen as exciting or unnecessary, and how much goodwill the franchise has outside of its traditional format. Depending on how these responses come back, the project could move forward aggressively, be reshaped into something smaller, or be quietly shelved altogether. For longtime Horizon fans, the question isn't whether experimentation is bad. Spin offs have existed forever, and some of the best franchises in gaming have benefited from trying new ideas alongside their main entries. The concern only really appears if a project like Horizon Hunters Gathering begins to pull focus resources, or identity away from what Horizon does best. The series earned its reputation through strong world building, compelling character work, and carefully paced storytelling. As long as those core experiences remain intact and prioritized, a side project can exist without threatening the franchise's foundation. If Hunter's Gathering ends up being a focused, well designed co op experience that complements the mainline games rather than compete with them, it could actually be a smart expansion of the Horizon universe. But if it feels like an attempt to chase trends at the expense of what made the series special, that's where fans are going to push back hard. Sony knows this, which is exactly why this conversation is happening in survey form instead of on a big stage. At this point, Horizon Hunter's Gathering is just a name attached to an idea, but it's a revealing one. It tells us that Sony is actively exploring how far the Horizon brand can stretch, what players are willing to accept, and how the future of the franchise might evolve beyond traditional single player releases. Whether that turns into something exciting or something unnecessary will come down entirely to execution, restraint, and respect for what Horizon already is. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you like to support the channel, check out my Patreon, where the latest exclusive is a full review of Metal Gear Solid and a deep look at how that game revived what was originally the Metal Gear franchise. Thanks for watching, and as always, game on.